الأسئلة في الفيديو ده مش خاصة فقط بطلاب الثانوية العامة، ولكنها بتخص أيضا طلاب أقسام اللغة الإنجليزية في الجامعة اللي مقرر عليهم القصة دي. الأسئلة بتشمل أسئلة كتاب الوزارة بالإجابات ومترجمة إلى العربي، وأسئلة نقدية عامة على القصة كلها وإجاباتها، وكمان في أسئلة نقدية لمستوى أعلى لطلاب اللغة الإنجليزية في المرحلة الجامعية.
Important critical questions about the novel Great Expectations for general secondary students and students of the University English Language Departments. How did Pip feel when he stole the food and the file? Did he do anything to relieve himself? Why not? He felt guilty and tried to tell Joe, but he didn't, as he wanted Joe to be his friend.
كيف كان شعور بيب عندما سرق الطعام والمبرد؟ هل قام بعمل شيء ما ليخفف عليه هذا الشعور؟ ولماذا فعل ذلك أو لماذا لم يفعل؟ شعر بيب بالذنب وحاول أن يخبر جو، ولكنه لم يفعل لأنه كان يحافظ على صداقته مع جو.
Why do you think Pip went to his parents' graves on Christmas Eve? He felt he was a lone orphan, and despite he was an orphan, his sister was cruel.
لماذا تعتقد سبب ذهاب بيب إلى قبر والديه في عيد الميلاد؟ لأنه شعر بالوحدة واليتم رغم كونه يتيما، إلا أن أخته كانت تعامله بقسوة.
What personal circumstance of Pip's is convenient for the convict? He could bring him a file from Joe, who was a blacksmith, to take off his leg irons.
ما هي ظروف بيب الشخصية التي تلائم السجين الهارب؟ إنه استطاع إحضار مبردا من جو الحداد ليفك القيود الحديدية في قدمه.
What is your impression of the man that Pip meets in the graveyard? First he seemed bad, but later he was very kind to Pip.
ما هو انطباعك في الرجل الذي قابله بيب في المقبرة؟ كان يبدو في الأول سيئا، ولكنه فيما بعد كان عطوفا للغاية مع بيب.
Joe and his wife treated Pip differently. How? Joe was very kind as a friend to Pip, but Mrs. Joe was cruel.
عامل بيب كل من جو وزوجته بشكل مختلف. كيف ذلك؟ جو كان عطوفا جدا كصديق له، بينما السيدة جو كانت قاسية.
I'd rather she hit me than you. What does this tell you about Joe's personality? He was very kind as a friend to Pip.
أود لو أنها كانت تضربني بدلا منك. ماذا تخبرنا هذه المقولة عن شخصية جو؟ كان عطوفا جدا كصديق لبيب.
Why was the convict, Magwitch, surprised when he learned that Joe was a blacksmith? He needed a file to take off his leg irons.
لماذا اندهش السجين ماجويتش عندما علم أن جو حدادا؟ لأنه كان محتاجا لمبرد ليفك قيوده التي في أرجله.
I hope we don't find the convicts, Joe. Why do you think Pip says this? He was afraid that the convict thought that he told the police.
أتمنى ألا نجد السجين يا جو. لماذا تعتقد سبب قول بيب لهذه المقولة؟ لأنه كان خائفا أن يعتقد السجين أنه هو الذي أخبر الشرطة عنه.
Why do you think the convict asked Pip a lot of questions? He wanted Pip to help him and to make sure that he was safe.
لماذا في اعتقادك سبب سؤال السجين لبيب الكثير من الأسئلة؟ لأنه كان يريد من بيب أن يساعده ويتأكد أنه بأمان.
Why was Pip unable to stay at the table with all the guests any longer and ran to the front door? He was afraid that his sister discovered that he stole the meat pie.
لماذا لم يعد بيب قادرا على الجلوس على المائدة مع الضيوف وأسرع إلى الباب؟ لأنه كان خائفا أن تكشف أخته أنه سرق فطيرة اللحم.
Mrs. Joes was unsatisfied with her life. Discuss. She didn't want to get married to a blacksmith and wasn't happy to bring up, look after, her young brother Pip.
لم تكن السيدة جو راضية عن حياتها. ناقش ذلك. لم تكن تريد أن تتزوج حدادا، ولم تكن سعيدة بتربية أخيها الصغير بيب.
Pip had a sad childhood. Illustrate. He was a poor orphan boy. He had little education and his sister treated him badly.
كانت طفولة بيب حزينة. وضح ذلك. كان ولدا يتيما وتلقى قدرا ضئيلا من التعليم، وعاملته أخته بشكل سيء.
The appearance of the soldiers saved Pip. Discuss. He was afraid that his sister discovered that he stole the meat pie and punish him.
أنقذ ظهور الجنود بيب. ناقش ذلك، حيث أن بيب كان خائفا أن تكتشف أخته سرقة الفطيرة وتعاقبه.
Pip had contradictory feeling towards the convict. Discuss. First he was afraid, but later he felt sorry for him.
كان البيب شعور متباين أو متناقض تجاه السجين. ناقش ذلك. في البداية كان خائفا منه، وفيما بعد كان يشفق عليه وشعر تجاهه بالأسف.
There is a gap generation between Pip and his sister. Illustrate. Pip's sister was 20 years older than him and wanted him to live like old poor people, but he was still little boy.
كان هناك فجوة أجيال بين بيب وأخته. وضح ذلك. كانت أخت بيب تكبره ب20 عاما، وكانت تريد أن يعيش حياة كبار السن وهو لا يزال صبيا.
If you were Pip, would you go to the graveyard at this early age alone? Why? No, because it is dangerous.
لو كنت مكان بيب، هل كنت ستذهب للمقابر وحدك في هذا السن؟ ولماذا؟ لا، لأنه أمر خطير.
Why do you think Pip helped the convict? He was afraid of him.
لماذا تعتقد سبب مساعدة بيب للسجين؟ لأنه كان خائفا منه.
Pip had contradictory feelings concerning telling Joe about his theft. Illustrate. He felt guilty and tried to tell Joe, but he didn't as he wanted Joe to be his friend.
كان البيب شعور متناقض حول إخبار جو بسرقته. وضح ذلك. شعر بالذنب وحاول إخبار جو، ولكنه لم يفعل ذلك خوفا على صداقته مع جو.
Why do you think the man in the inn had Joe's file? That man had met the convict.
لماذا تعتقد الرجل الذي كان في الحانة لديه مبرد جو، حيث أن هذا الرجل قابل السجين؟
Why did Mrs. Joe think that Pip should be grateful to her? She looked after and brought him after his parents' death.
لماذا تعتقد السيدة جو أن بيب كان يجب أن يكون ممتنا وشاكرا لها، لأنها قامت بتربيته بعد وفاة والديه؟
How grateful was Joe to his father? He taught him how to be a blacksmith and didn't let go, but he had a good heart.
كيف كان جو ممتنا لوالده، حيث أنه علمه الحدادة ولم يتركه وكان طيبا؟
The convict showed that he wasn't a bad person. Explain. He was brave and rescued Pip when he said that he stole the food.
تبين أن اللص لم يكن شخصا سيئا. اشرح ذلك. كان شجاعا وأنقذ بيب عندما أخبر أنه من سرق الطعام.
Do you think the convict understood Pip's signal, shaking his head, that Pip did not inform the police? Why not? Yes, because he realized that Pip was afraid and told the truth.
هل تعتقد أن السجين فهم إشارة بيب بهز رأسه بأنه لم يخبر الشرطة؟ لماذا ولماذا لا؟ نعم، لأنه أدرك أن بيب كان خائفا وقال الحقيقة.
Estella described Pip as being common. Why does she do this? He had dirty hands and ugly boots.
وصفت ستيلا بيب بأنه من العامة. لماذا؟ لأنه كان لديه يدين متسختين وحذاء قبيح.
Why did Miss Havisham give Joe a large bag of money? She wanted Pip to become Joe's apprentice and be a blacksmith.
لماذا أعطت الأنسة هافشم جو كيسا من النقود؟ لأنها كانت تريد أن يصبح بيب صبيا ويتعلم الحدادة.
Why did an argument arise between Orlick and Mrs. Joe? Orlick was annoyed because Joe gave Pip an afternoon off to see Miss Havisham, but he didn't get any time off.
لماذا كان هناك جدلا بين أورليك والسيدة جو؟ أورليك كان متضايقا لأخذ بيب إجازة بعد الظهر ليرى الأنسة هافشم ولم يأخذ هو مثلها.
Was the main reason for asking Joe for afternoon's holiday was to visit Mrs. Havisham and thank her for his help? He wanted to see Estella.
هل كان السبب الرئيسي لطلب بيب من جو إجازة بعد الظهر ليرى الأنسة هافشم ويشكرها لمساعدته؟ لا، كان يريد رؤية ستيلا.
How did Betty have a major role in achieving Pip's ambition? She helped him to be well educated and taught him.
كيف كان لبيدي دورا كبيرا في تحقيق طموح بيب؟ ساعدته ليتعلم تعليما جيدا.
The older Pip became, the more his personality changed. Explain. At first he was humble and had simple expectations. He wanted to be a blacksmith, but later he changed and had great expectations. He wanted to be well educated and a gentleman. He began to feel shame towards his home and family. He was boasted and no longer wanted to meet his poor family or friends.
كلما كبر بيب كلما تغيرت شخصيته. اشرح ذلك. في البداية كان متواضعا ولديه آمال بسيطة، حيث كان يريد أن يكون حدادا، ولكنه فيما بعد تغير وأصبحت لديه آمال كبرى. كان يريد أن يصبح نبيلا متعلما، وبدأ يشعر بالخجل تجاه موطنه وأسرته، وكان متفاخرا ولم يعد يرغب برؤية أسرته الفقيرة ولا أصدقائه.
Do you think Pip really wanted to be Joe's apprentice? At first he was humble and had simple expectations. He wanted to be a blacksmith, but later he changed and had great expectations. He wanted to be well educated and a gentleman.
هل تعتقد أن بيب كان بالفعل يريد أن يصبح صبيا لدى حداد؟ في البداية كان متواضعا ولديه آمال بسيطة، كان يريد أن يصبح حدادا، ولكن فيما بعد تغير وأصبحت لديه آمال كبرى. كان يريد أن يصبح نبيلا متعلما.
The meeting between Pip and the pale young gentleman in the garden was strange. Explain. Firstly, the pale young gentleman greeted Pip, then he asked him to have a fight.
كان لقاء بيب والفتى النبيل الشاحب في الحديقة غريبا. اشرح ذلك. أولا قام بتحية بيب، وبعدها طلب منه أن يتعارك معه.
What does the incident with the bank notes indicate about Joe? Joe was honest because he went back to the inn to find the man and return his note to him.
حادث العملة الورقية إلى ما يشير بالنسبة لجو يدل على أنه كان أمينا لعودته للحانة ليجد الرجل ويعيد إليه عملته.
I'd rather she hit me than you. What does this tell you about Joe's personality? He was very kind.
أود لو كانت تضربني بدلا منك. ماذا تخبرنا هذه المقولة عن شخصية جو؟ كان عطوفا جدا.
What did Pip want to do when he realized that the man in the inn had met Pip's convict? Why? He wanted to take Joe away. He continued to worry that his help to the convict will be discovered.
ماذا كان يريد بيب أن يفعل عندما علم أن الرجل الذي كان بالحانة قابل السجين؟ ولماذا؟ كان يريد أن يذهب بجو بعيدا، واستمر في القلق أن تنكشف مساعدته للسجين.
Why was Miss Havisham always asking Pip about his opinion of Estella? She wanted him to fall in love with her and then break his heart.
لماذا كانت الأنسة هافشم تسأل دائما بيب عن رأيه في ستيلا ليقع في حبها وتحطم قلبه؟
Do you think education or money was more important? Education was more important than money.
هل تعتقد أن التعليم أم المال أكثر أهمية؟ التعليم أكثر أهمية من المال.
What is Pip's impression of the relatives of Miss Havisham who come for her birthday? They care only for any inheritance they may receive from Miss Havisham.
ما هو انطباع بيب تجاه أقارب الآنسة هافشم الذين حضروا عيد ميلادها؟ كانوا فقط مهتمين بما يرثوه منها.
Why do you think Miss Havisham wore a wedding dress? It was a memory of the day her lover left her.
لماذا كانت الآنسة هافشم ترتدي ثياب الزفاف؟ كذكرى لليوم الذي تركها فيها محبوبها.
Was Mrs. Joe right to expect Pip to make a fortune living with Miss Havisham? No.
هل كانت السيدة جو محقة في توقع أخذ بيب لثروة الآنسة هافشم بالعيش معها؟ لا، لم يكن ينبغي أن تكون جشعة أو طماعة.
Why do you think all the rooms in Miss Havisham's house were lit by candles? The curtains were closed.
لماذا تعتقد سبب إضاءة جميع غرف منزل الآنسة هافشم بالشموع؟ الستائر كانت مغلقة.
Pip was sensitive. Prove this. He felt sad when Estella insulted him.
كان بيب شخصية حساسة. اثبت ذلك. شعر بالحزن لإهانة ستيلا له.
What do you think of Estella? Why? She was proud and cruel.
ما رأيك في ستيلا؟ كانت مغرورة وقاسية.
Why did Pip describe Miss Havisham as the strangest lady he had ever seen? She was dressed completely in white, with a long white veil and flowers in her hair. Her hair was white, the flowers were dead, the white dress was now yellow with age. She was a bride in a wedding dress.
لماذا وصف بيب الأنسة هافشام بأنها أغرب سيدة رآها؟ كانت ترتدي ثيابا بيضاء وطرحة طويلة بيضاء وزهور في شعرها الأبيض وزهور ميتة، وأصبح الثوب الأبيض أصفرا بسبب مرور الزمن عليه، وكانت تبدو كعروس يوم زفافها.
Why do you think Miss Havisham wanted Estella to break Pip's heart? She wanted to take revenge on men because she was deceived by his fiancée who took a lot of her money and left her at the wedding day.
لماذا أرادت الأنسة هافشام أن تحطم استيلا قلوب الرجال؟ كانت تريد الانتقام بسبب خداع خطيبها لها وأخذه لمالها وتركها يوم زفافها.
Was Pip right to feel ashamed of his simple life? Why not? No, we should be satisfied and humble.
هل كان بيب محقا في خجله من حياته البسيطة؟ لماذا ولماذا لا؟ لا، كان يجب أن يكون قنوعا ومتواضعا.
Estella controlled Pip from the very beginning. Explain. She made him fall in love with her and changed his simple expectations into great expectations.
سيطرت ستيلا على بيب منذ البداية. اشرح ذلك. جعلته يقع في حبها وغيرت آماله البسيطة إلى آمال كبيرة.
Give 2 reasons that Estella didn't play with Pip. She was proud and cruel and said he was common and poor.
اذكر السبب لعدم لعب ستيلا مع بيب. كانت متكبرة وقاسية وقالت أنه من العامة وفقير.
Do you think Pip looked common when he visited Miss Havisham's? Why, yes. He had dirty hands and ugly boots.
هل كان يبدو على بيب أنه من العامة عندما زار الأنسة هافشام؟ ولماذا أو لماذا لا؟ نعم، لأن يديه كانت متسختين وحذاؤه كان قبيحا.
Miss Havisham's house was dull. Explain. Everything stopped and didn't change, no open curtains, no light.
كان منزل الأنسة هافشام كئيبا، حيث توقف كل شيء ولم يتغير، وكانت الستائر مغلقة ولم يصل الضوء إلى داخل المنزل.
Pip was ambitious. Explain. He had great expectations. He wanted to be well educated and a gentleman. He began to feel shame towards his home and family. He was boasted and no longer wanted to meet his poor family or friends.
بيب كان طموحا، حيث أصبحت لديه آمال كبيرة بأن يصبح ثريا متعلما، ولم يعد راضيا عن حياته السابقة، وكان يخجل من قريته وأصدقائه القدامى.
What would have happened if Pip hadn't gone to Miss Havisham? He would be a blacksmith and still humble and satisfied.
ماذا كان سيحدث لو لم يقابل بيب الأنسة هافشام؟ كان سيصبح حدادا ويظل متواضعا.
Do you feel sorry for Miss Havisham? Why? No, she wanted revenge on all men. We shouldn't punish innocent people.
هل تشعر بالأسف تجاه الأنسة هافشام؟ ولماذا؟ لا، لأنه لم يكن ينبغي عليها أن تنتقم من الناس البريئة أو أناس بريئة وتعاقبهم.
Why do you think Pip was frightened of the man in the inn? Because Pip continued to worry that his help to the convict will be discovered.
لماذا تعتقد أن بيب كان خائفا من الرجل الذي كان في الحانة؟ بسبب قلقه أن تنكشف مساعدته للسجين.
Do you think Orlick was right to feel angry with Joe? Why? No, Orlick seemed jealous of Pip as Pip is active and hard-working, but Orlick is lazy.
هل تعتقد أن أورليك كان محقا في أن يشعر بالغضب من جو؟ ولماذا؟ لا، أورليك كان غيورا من بيب الذي كان يعمل بجد، ولكن أورليك كان كسولا.
Mrs. Joe and Uncle Pumblechook were greedy. Explain. They wanted Miss Havisham to adopt and give Pip all her money, and they wanted Pip's visits to continue to make their own money.
السيدة جو والعم بابلتشوك كانوا جشعين. وضح أو اشرح ذلك. كانوا يريدون من الأنسة هافشام أن تتبنى بيب وتعطيه كل مالها، وكانوا يريدون زيارات بيب أن تستمر ليحصلوا على مال خاص بهم.
What do you think of Miss Havisham's relatives? Why? They were greedy and visited her on her birthday in order to win her favor, except Matthew Pocket, who warned her not to give her money to her fiancé.
ما رأيك في أقارب الأنسة هافشام؟ ولماذا؟ كانوا جشعين وكانوا يزوروها في عيد ميلادها من أجل نيل مصلحتهم، فيما عدا ماثيو الذي كان يحذرها بألا تعطي مالها إلى خطيبها.
Pip was stronger than Herbert Pocket. Prove. When he fought him he won.
كان بيب أقوى من هربرت بوكيت. اثبت ذلك. عندما تعارك معه هزمه.
Pip had a sense of gratitude. Explain. He went to Miss Havisham to thank her for making him an apprentice for Joe, and he tried to help his benefactor Provis, Magwitch.
كان لدى بيب شعور بالامتنان. فسر ذلك. ذهب إلى الأنسة هافشام ليشكرها على مساعدته أن يكون صبيا لجو، وحاول مساعدة الممول له برافز أو
Orlick hated Pip. Prove. Orlick seemed jealous of Pip and thought Pip had holidays and less work than him and always spoiled things for him.
أورليك كان يكره بيب. اثبت ذلك. كان يبدو على أورليك الغيرة من بيب، حيث كان يعتقد أن بيب كان يأخذ إجازات وكان يعمل أقل منه، وكان دائما يفسد عليه أموره.
Why do you think the man in the inn gave Pip a note? The convict sent it for Pip, who had helped him.
لماذا تعتقد أن الرجل الذي كان في الحانة أعطى بيب نقودا ورقية؟ السجين أرسلها لبيب الذي ساعده سابقا.
Why do you think Miss Havisham sent her relatives away? They were greedy and visited her on her birthday to win her favor.
لماذا تعتقد الأنسة هافشام قامت بطرد أقاربها بعيدا؟ كانوا جشعين وكانوا يزوروها في عيد ميلادها من أجل نيل مصلحتهم.
Pip was a noble fighter. Prove. He felt sorry for his opponent who was brave.
كان بيب محاربا نبيلا. اثبت ذلك. شعر بالأسف لخصمه الذي كان شجاعا.
Show that Miss Havisham was rude with her visitors. She sent them away.
وضح أن مس هافشام كانت وقحة مع زوارها. قامت بطرد أقاربها.
Why was Orlick angry when Pip visited Miss Havisham? Orlick didn't get a day off work.
لماذا غضب أورليك عندما زار بيب الأنسة هافشام؟ أورليك لم يحصل على إجازة من العمل مثل بيب.
Why do you think Orlick mentioned that more convicts had escaped from the prison ship? To give the others the idea that a convict that hit Mrs. Joe.
لماذا تعتقد سبب ذكر أورليك لهروب معظم المساجين من سفينة السجن؟ ليعطي للآخرين فكرة أن أحد هؤلاء السجناء هو من ضرب السيدة جو.
Do you agree with Pip that education can change lives? Why? Yes. Education makes people more respectable.
هل تتفق مع بيب أن التعليم يمكن أن يغير حياة الشخص ولماذا؟ نعم، فالتعليم يجعل الناس أكثر احتراما.
Would you leave your friends and family behind to move to a big city to get a better education? Why? Yes. To achieve my ambitions.
هل كنت ستترك أصدقائك وأسرتك لتنتقل إلى مدينة كبيرة لتحصل على قسط أفضل من التعليم ولماذا؟ نعم، لأحقق طموحي.
Pip tells Biddy, I knew that I was making a mistake, but I could not change my feelings. What would you do if you were Pip? Give reasons. I wouldn't let my feelings control me because I should think well and let my mind control my life.
بيب يخبر بيدي أنه كان يعلم بارتكابه خطأ، ولكنه لم يستطع تغيير مشاعره. ماذا كنت ستفعل لو كنت مكان بيب؟ أعطي أسبابا لذلك. لن أدع مشاعري تسيطر علي وأجعل عقلي يقود حياتي.
Why do you think Pip suspected Orlick to have hit Mrs. Joe? Orlick had been so angry with Mrs. Joe.
لماذا تعتقد أن بيب شك في ضرب أورليك للسيدة جو؟ لأن أورليك كان غاضبا جدا منها.
Why do you think Miss Havisham was happy that Estella had gone? Pip felt he lost Estella and had a broken heart.
لماذا تعتقد سبب سعادة الآنسة هافشام لذهاب ستيلا؟ لأن بيب شعر بفقدانه لستيلا وتحطم قلبه.
Orlick was deceitful and wicked. Prove this. He attacked Mrs. Joe and made her unable to speak or walk again.
كان أورليك مخادعا وماكرا. اثبت ذلك. هجم على السيدة جو وجعلها غير قادرة على الكلام أو السير مرة أخرى.
Why do you think Mrs. Joe drew a hammer? To make others understand that Orlick had attacked her.
لماذا تعتقد سبب رسم السيدة جو لشاكوش؟ ليفهم الآخرين أن أورليك هو الذي قام بالهجوم عليها.
Biddy was helpful to Mrs. Joe's family. Explain. She cooked and cleaned for Pip and Joe while Mrs. Joe was ill.
كانت بيدي متعاونة مع أسرة السيدة جو. وضح ذلك. كانت تطهي الطعام وتنظف المنزل لبيب وجو أثناء مرض السيدة جو.
Why do you think Biddy was sad when Pip talked about Estella? Biddy wanted Pip to love her as she loved him.
لماذا تعتقد سبب حزن بيدي لحديث بيب عن ستيلا؟ لأنها كانت تريد أن يحبها كما هي تحبه.
What great expectations do you think Pip had? To be a rich gentleman, have a good education and marry Estella.
ما هي الآمال الكبرى التي كانت لدى بيب؟ أن يصبح نبيلا ثريا ومتعلما جيدا ويتزوج ستيلا.
Joe was satisfied. Explain. He didn't take money for losing Pip as an apprentice.
كان جو قنوعا. فسر ذلك. لم يأخذ مالا مقابل ترك بيب له في العمل.
Do you sympathize with Mrs. Joe? Why? Yes. Orlick attacked her and she was unable to speak or walk again.
هل تتعاطف مع السيدة جو؟ نعم، لأن أورليك هجم عليها وجعلها غير قادرة على الكلام أو السير مرة أخرى.
Fate helped Pip against Mrs. Joe. Explain. She was no longer able to hurt him again.
ساعد القدر بيب ضد أخته. فسر ذلك. لم تعد قادرة على إيذائه مرة أخرى.
Biddy was wise. Explain. She asked Pip not to care about what Estella thought.
كانت بيدي حكيمة، فسر ذلك. طلبت من بيب ألا يعير ستيلا أي اهتمام.
Biddy was a better person than Estella. Prove this. She loved Pip despite his poverty.
كانت بيدي أفضل من ستيلا، اثبت ذلك، حيث أحبت بيب رغم فقره.
Why do you think Pip couldn't love Biddy rather than Estella? His heart was set on Estella.
لماذا تعتقد عدم قدرة حب بيب لبيدي أفضل من ستيلا؟ لأن قلبه كان معلقا بستيلا.
Why do you think Biddy and Joe didn't comment when Pip wanted to wear his new clothes away? They understood that Pip began to change.
لماذا لم يعلق كل من بيدي وجو عندما أراد بيب أن يرتدي ثيابه الجديدة بعيدا عن أعين سكان قريته؟ لفهمهم أن بيب بدأ يتغير ويخجل منهم.
Pip treated Joe cruelly. Explain. Pip was ashamed of Joe's poor education.
عامل بيب جو بقسوة، فسر ذلك. كان بيب يخجل من فقر تعليم جو.
What do you think of Pip when he asked Biddy to help Joe speak better? Why? This was wrong. Joe was kind and loved Pip and sacrificed for him.
ما رأيك في طلب بيب من بيدي أن تساعد جو على التحدث بشكل أفضل، ولماذا؟ كان هذا خطأ، لأن جو كان طيبا وأحب بيب وضحى من أجله.
Why do you think Miss Havisham laughed when Pip felt he had lost Estella? Pip fell in love with Estella, who would break his heart.
لماذا تعتقد سبب ضحك الأنسة هافيجم عندما شعر بيب بفقدان ستيلا؟ لأن بيب حبها وكانت ستيلا ستحطم قلبه.
What do you think of Sarah Pocket and why? She was bad. She treated Pip badly and she wouldn't give him anything.
ما رأيك في سارة بوكيت ولماذا؟ كانت سيئة، حيث عاملت بيب بشكل سيء ولم تكن لتعطيه أي شيء.
Why do you think Mrs. Joe was scared of Orlick in the kitchen? He attacked her before.
لماذا تعتقد سبب فزع وخوف السيدة جو من أورليك في المطبخ لهجومه عليها من قبل؟
Why do you think Biddy didn't agree to make Joe speak better? She knew Pip had changed and she didn't want Joe to be proud.
لماذا تعتقد سبب رفض بيدي جعل جو يتحدث بشكل أفضل؟ كانت تعلم أن بيب تغير ولم تكن تريد لجو أن يصبح متكبرا.
Do you think Havisham reacted well to her fiancé's leaving her? Why? She reacted badly. She should have made her own happiness.
هل تعتقد أن رد فعل الأنسة هافيشم لترك خطيبها لها جيدا؟ ولماذا؟ لا، لأنها كان ينبغي عليها أن تبحث عن سعادتها.
What do you think made Pip sure Miss Havisham was his secret benefactor? Herbert told Pip that Mr. Jaggers was Miss Havisham's lawyer.
ماذا تعتقد سبب اعتقاد بيب بأن الأنسة هافيشم هي الممول السري له؟ لأن هيربرت أخبره أن السيد جاجرز كان محاميها.
Was Herbert right to think he had a lucky escape by not getting engaged to Estella? Why? Yes. Estella was proud and cruel.
هل كان هيربرت على صواب لاعتقاده أنه كان محظوظا لإفلاته من الارتباط بستيلا؟ ولماذا؟ نعم، لأنها كانت متكبرة وقاسية.
Miss Havisham's half-brother was cruel. Explain. He wanted to take his sister's money. He didn't care if he had to hurt her to get it.
كان أخو الأنسة هافيشم غير الشقيق قاسيا، فسر ذلك. كان يريد مالها ولم يكن يبالي بأذيتها ليحصل عليه.
Miss Havisham was unwise and cruel to Matthew Pocket. Discuss and prove this. She sent Matthew out of her house when he warned her against her dishonest fiancé.
كانت الآنسة هافيجم غير حكيمة وقاسية تجاه ماثيو باكت ناقش ذلك. طردت ماثيو من منزلها عندما حذرها من خطيبها غير الأمين.
What do you think of Bentley Drummle? He was proud and grumpy.
ما رأيك في بنتلي درامل؟ كان متكبرا وكئيبا.
Why do you think Pip didn't enjoy being with Mr. Jaggers? Mr. Jaggers never laughed, everyone was scared of him.
لماذا تعتقد سبب عدم استمتاع بيب مع السيد جاجرز؟ لأن السيد جاجرز لم يكن يضحك أبدا وكان الجميع يهابه.
Why do you think Miss Havisham advised Pip to follow Mr. Jaggers' advice? Mr. Jaggers would help Pip have a good future.
لماذا تعتقد سبب نصيحة الأنسة هافيشام لبيب باتباع نصيحة السيد جاجرز؟ لأنه كان سيساعد بيب في تحقيق مستقبل جيد.
Why did Miss Havisham expect that Pip had a good life ahead of him? He had a secret benefactor who would pay for his education.
لماذا كانت الأنسة هافيشام تعتقد أن أمام بيب مستقبلا جيدا؟ لأنه كان لديه ممول سري ويمنحه ما يحتاجه لتعليمه.
How did Herbert help Pip to be a gentleman? Herbert asked Pip to behave at the dinner table.
كيف ساعده هربرت بيب ليصبح نبيلا؟ طلب من بيب كيف يتصرف وهو على مائدة العشاء.
Miss Havisham's brother was extravagant and careless. Prove this. He spent all the money he had inherited.
كان أخو الأنسة هافيشام غير الشقيق مبذرا ومهمل. اثبت ذلك. أنفق جميع ماله الذي ورثه.
Miss Havisham's brother was cunning. Explain. He planned with his sister's fiancé to take his sister's money.
كان أخو الأنسة هافيشام فاسدا. خطط مع خطيب أخته للاستيلاء على مالها.
What do you think of Mr. Matthew Pocket's family? Why, they were cheerful and hospitable. They welcomed Pip at their house.
ما رأيك في أسرة ماثيو بوكيت ولماذا؟ كانوا مبتهجين ومضيافين فقد رحبوا ببيب في منزلهم.
Mr. Matthew Pocket was helpful to Pip. Explain. He taught Pip how to live like a gentleman and improve his education.
كان السيد ماثيو بوكيت متعاونا مع بيب. فسر ذلك. علمه كيف يعيش مثل الشخص النبيل ويحسن تعليمه.
Mr. Wemmick was not a good person. Why? He was boasting about his expensive ring which was a present from people he had worked with.
لم يكن السيد ويميك جيدا. كان يتفاخر بخاتمه الغالي الذي حصل عليه كهدية من أحد الزبائن.
Do you think Mr. Jaggers was a good person? Why? No. He was boastful.
هل تعتقد أن السيد جاجرز كان جيدا؟ لا، لأنه كان متباهيا بنفسه.
Why do you think the criminals are afraid of Mr. Jaggers? He was a strong and important lawyer.
لماذا تعتقد سبب خوف المجرمين من السيد جاجرز؟ كان محاميا قويا وهاما.
Why do you think Pip didn't enjoy dinner at Mr. Jaggers's house? Because Mr. Jaggers spoke boastfully and scared his servant.
لماذا تعتقد سبب عدم استمتاع بيب بالعشاء مع السيد جاجرز؟ لأن السيد جاجرز كان يتحدث بتفاخر ويخيف خدمه.
Why do you think Mr. Jaggers asked Molly to leave the room? She was getting too much attention.
لماذا تعتقد سبب طلب السيد جاجرز لمولي مغادرة الغرفة؟ لأنها جذبت الكثير من الاهتمام.
Why do you think Pip wished Joe would not to come to London? Pip was ashamed of Joe.
لماذا تعتقد سبب عدم رغبة بيب بحضور جو إلى لندن؟ لأنه كان يخجل منه.
Prove that Drummle was boastful. He liked to tell others how good he was at doing different things.
اثبت أن درامل كان متباهيا. كان يحب أن يخبر الآخرين كم هو ماهرا في عمل الأشياء.
Why do you think Mr. Jaggers made the boys talk boastfully? He wanted to entertain himself by this.
لماذا تعتقد سبب سماح السيد جاجرز للأولاد أن يتحدثوا بفخر وتباهي؟ كان يريد تسلية نفسه.
Herbert was kind towards Joe. Explain. Herbert tried to help Joe to feel comfortable.
كان هيربرت عطوفا مع جو. فسر ذلك. حاول هيربرت جعل جو يشعر بالراحة.
Do you think Joe did something to make Pip ashamed? Why? Yes. Joe coughed too much, sat too far away from the table, and dropped food everywhere.
هل تعتقد أن جو فعل شيئا يخجل بيب منه، ولماذا؟ نعم، فقد كان يسعل كثيرا وجلس بعيدا عن المائدة وأسقط الطعام في كل مكان.
Do you think Magwitch was fairly punished? Why? No. He had a life sentence for just trying to escape.
هل تعتقد أن ماجويتش عوقب بشكل عادل، ولماذا؟ لا، فقد عوقب بالسجن مدى الحياة فقط لمجرد محاولة الهروب.
Molly was not an ordinary woman. Explain. Was Mr. Jaggers right to describe Molly's hands as being remarkable? Why? She had stronger wrists than men.
لم تكن مولي امرأة عادية. فسر ذلك. وهل كان مستر جاجرز على صواب عندما وصف يديها بأنها مميزة؟ ولماذا؟ لقد كان لديها ساعدان قويان أقوى من سواعد الرجال.
Mr. Jaggers seemed to be a bad host. Explain. He made his guests feel uncomfortable and embarrassed.
كان يبدو أن السيد جاجرز مضيافا سيئا لضيوفه. فسر ذلك. جعل ضيوفه يشعرون بعدم الراحة والإحراج.
Why do you think the convict who had given Pip the shiny coin didn't recognize Pip? Pip was older now, and dressed like a gentleman.
لماذا تعتقد أن السجين الذي أعطى بيب العملة اللامعة لم يتعرف عليه؟ لأن بيب كان أكبر الآن ويلبس ثيابا يبدو فيها كأحد النبلاء.
Why do you think Pip was shocked when he saw Estella again? Estella was more beautiful than ever.
لماذا صدم بيب لرؤيته ستيلا مرة أخرى؟ لأنها كانت أكثر جمالا من ذي قبل.
What do you think about Pip's decision not to see Joe again? Why? It was wrong because he was a kind person who loved Pip very much.
ما رأيك في قرار بيب لعدم رؤية جو مرة أخرى، ولماذا؟ كان خطأ لأن جو كان طيبا وأحب بيب كثيرا.
She will make you unhappy. You should forget her. Who says this to Pip and why? Herbert. Because he knew Estella was cruel.
سوف تجعلك غير سعيد. يجب أن تنساها. من أخبر بيب هذا ولماذا؟ هربرت. لأنه كان يعلم أنها قاسية.
I expect you have new friends. The ones you had in the village wouldn't be good enough now, would they? Why did Estella say this, and do you think it is true? Why? She says this because Pip is now a gentleman. I think it is true, because Pip does not want to see Joe or people from the village now.
أتوقع أن لديك أصدقاء جدد، فالذين في القرية لم يعودوا ملائمين بشكل كاف لك الآن، أليس كذلك؟ لماذا قالت ستيلا هذا القول؟ وهل تعتقد أنه كان صحيحا؟ بيب الآن شخصا نبيلا، ولم يزر جو ولا أناس قريته.
If she is cruel, love her. If she breaks your heart, love her. I made her what she is, to be loved. Why do you think Miss Havisham wants people to love Estella when she is so cruel? She wants people to feel the same as she did when her cruel fiancé left her.
لو كانت قاسية أحبها، لو حطمت قلبك أحبها، لقد جعلتها كذلك حتى يحبها الآخرين. لماذا تعتقد أن الأنسة هافشام تريد الناس أن يقعوا في حب ستيلا بينما هي بهذه القسوة؟ أرادت أن تشعر بنفس الذي شعرت به.
We are not free to do what we want, you know. We have to follow our instructions. Whose instructions do you think Estella is talking about, and why are they not free? Miss Havisham gave the instructions. She wanted to control them.
نحن لسنا أحرارا لفعل ما نريد. تعلم أننا مضطرون لاتباع الأوامر التي تصدر لنا. أي أوامر تعتقد كانت ستيلا تقصدها في الحديث عنها ولماذا هي غير حرة؟ أوامر الأنسة هافشام حيث أرادت السيطرة عليها.
Why do you think some of Havisham's relatives, the Pockets, were jealous of Pip? Miss Havisham helped Pip, although he was not her relative.
لماذا تعتقد سبب غيرة بعض أقارب الأنسة هافشام من بيب لمساعدتها له رغم كونه ليس من أقاربها؟
Pip's character was not strong. Illustrate. Estella had a great influence over Pip. Explain.
لم تكن شخصية بيب قوية، فسر ذلك. وكان لستيلا تأثيرا عليه، وضح ذلك. جعلته يغير حياته ويصبح لديه آمال كبرى ليتزوجها.
Estella hated common people. Prove this. She advised Pip not to see Joe again.
كانت ستيلا تكره عامة الناس. أثبت ذلك. نصحت بيب بأن لا يرى جو مرة أخرى.
Pip was hesitant, not decisive. Prove this. He still wanted to marry Estella though he knew she wouldn't make him happy.
كان بيب مترددا وليس حازما. اثبت ذلك. كان لا يزال يريد الزواج من ستيلا رغم علمه أنها لن تجعله سعيدا.
Estella could analyze her own character well. Explain. She said she had no heart, she was neither kind nor good.
استطاعت ستيلا تحليل شخصيتها بشكل جيد وكانت أمينة. فسر ذلك. قالت أنها ليس لديها قلب ولم تكن عطوفة أو طيبة.
If you were Pip, would you love Estella? Why not? No. She was cruel and broke men's hearts.
لو كنت مكان بيب هل كنت ستقع في حب ستيلا؟ لماذا؟ أو لماذا لا؟ لا، لأنها كانت قاسية وتحطم قلوب الرجال.
Miss Havisham cared for Estella's future. Illustrate. She sent Estella to Richmond to stay with a wealthy lady, who would introduce her to suitable people in London.
اهتمت الأنسة هافشام بمستقبل ستيلا. وضح ذلك. أرسلت ستيلا إلى ريتشموند لتبقى مع سيدة ثرية لتقدمها لأناس مناسبين في لندن.
Miss Havisham loved Estella as if she were her own daughter. Explain. She asked Estella to write to her from Richmond to say how she was, where she had been, and what she had worn. She gave her all her jewelry.
أحبت الأنسة هافشام ستيلا كما لو كانت ابنتها. فسر ذلك. طلبت من ستيلا أن تكتب لها من ريتشموند لتخبرها عن حالها وأين كانت وماذا كانت ترتدي، وأعطتها جميع مجوهراتها وورثتها فيما بعد.
Pip still had good feelings towards Joe. Explain. He felt guilty that he hadn't visited Joe, so he sent him a present.
لم تزل لدى بيب مشاعر جيدة تجاه جو. فسر ذلك. شعر بالذنب لأنه لم يزره لذلك أرسل إليه هدية.
There was a conflict between Pip's heart and mind. Explain. He knew that Estella wouldn't make him happy, but he adored her.
كان هناك صراع بين قلب بيب وعقله. فسر ذلك. كان يعلم أن ستيلا لن تجعله سعيدا، ورغم ذلك كان يعشقها.
Orlick was unreliable. Prove this. Miss Havisham was not safe with him as a gatekeeper.
لم يكن أورليك شخصا يمكن الوثوق به. وضح ذلك. لم تكن الأنسة هافيشام آمنة مع وجوده كبواب لها.
Why do you think Miss Havisham was surprised when Pip said everyone must love Estella? Miss Havisham knew Estella broke men's hearts.
لماذا تعتقد أن الأنسة هافيشام مندهشة عندما قال بيب أن كل شخص يجب أن يحب ستيلا؟ لأنها كانت تعلم أنها تحطم قلوب الرجال.
In what ways had Pip and Herbert become extravagant? They had become members of an expensive gentleman's club.
بأي شكل أصبح كل من بيب وهيربرت مسرفين؟ أصبحوا أعضاء في أحد أندية النبلاء الأثرياء، وكان نادي مكلفا.
What suggests that Provis, Magwitch, was Pip's secret benefactor? What suggests that Miss Havisham was not Pip's secret benefactor? Magwitch sent Pip a shiny new coin. Miss Havisham decided to invest her money in Estella's future, rather than Pip's.
ما هي الاقتراحات التي تجعل بروفيس أو ماجويتش هو الممول السري لبيب؟ وما هي الاقتراحات الأخرى التي تجعل الأنسة هافيشام ليست هي الممول السري له؟ ماجويتش أعطى بيب عملة براقة جيدة. قررت الأنسة هافيشام استثمار مالها لصالح مستقبل ستيلا وليس لصالح بيب.
You know that I want to trick all of my admirers. All of them, apart from you. Why do you think Estella says this to Pip? Estella wants Pip to believe that he is special.
أنت تعلم أنني أريد خداع جميع من يعجبون بي كلهم فيما عدا أنت. لماذا تعتقد سبب قول ستيلا لهذا القول لبيب؟ كانت تريد أن يعرف أن له وضعا مميزا أو خاصا عندها.
I have never forgotten what you did for me that day, Pip. I've worked hard in Australia ever since, so that you won't need to work. Why does Magwitch say this? He remembers how Pip helped him in the graveyard, when he was a boy.
لن أنسى ما فعلته لي يا بيب في ذلك اليوم. لقد عملت جاهدا في استراليا من ذلك الوقت لكي لا أدعك تحتاج إلى العمل. لماذا قال ماجويتش هذا الكلام؟ كان ممتنا لبيب لمساعدته له في المقبرة عندما كان صبيا. الجمال جمال الروح وليس جمال الجسد. كيف كان هذا المثل أو الحكمة منطبقة على ستيلا؟ كانت ستيلا جميلة ولكن روحها كانت مريضة، فلم يكن لديها قلب وكانت قاسية.
Yes, Pip, I've made a gentleman of you. Who made Pip a gentleman? How did Pip become a gentleman? Magwitch. Pip went to London and had a fine education and new friends.
نعم يا بيب، لقد جعلت منك شخصا نبيلا. كيف أصبح بيب نبيلا؟ ذهب بيب إلى لندن وتعلم جيدا وكون أصدقاء جدد.
Pip never forgot his revenge. Explain. He wanted to take revenge on Orlick who attacked his sister.
لم ينسى أبدا بيب انتقامه. فسر ذلك. أراد الانتقام من أورليك الذي هاجم أخته.
Why do you think Estella preferred Drummle to Pip? Drummle was rich, boastful and good-looking.
لماذا تعتقد سبب تفضيل ستيلا لدرامل على بيب؟ لأن درامل كان ثريا ومتباهيا بنفسه وحسن المظهر.
Pip had a good nature. Explain. He felt guilty for making Herbert extravagant. He felt guilty for not visiting Joe and Biddy.
كان لدى بيب طبيعة جيدة، فسر ذلك. شعر بيب بالذنب لجعله هربرت مبذرا وعدم زيارته لجو وبيدي.
Bentley Drummel was Pip's opponent. Explain. Drummel visited Estella and loved her.
كان درامل منافسا لبيب، فسر ذلك. كان درامل يزور ستيلا وأحبها.
Pip forgot about his sister. Was that right? Why? No, it wasn't right. She was still his sister who had cared for him.
نسى بيب أخته. هل كان على صواب في ذلك ولماذا؟ لا، لم يكن على صواب، فهي لا تزال أخته التي ربته.
Mr. Jaggers was generous to Pip on his 21st birthday. Illustrate. Mr. Jaggers gave Pip a present of £500.
كان السيد جاجرز كريما مع بيب في عيد ميلاده 21. وضح ذلك. أعطى السيد جاجرز بيب هدية 500 جنيه في عيد ميلاده.
Pip was faithful, helpful, to Herbert. Prove this. Pip paid Mr. Clarker to give Herbert a job.
كان بيب مخلصا ومتعاونا مع هربرت. اثبت ذلك. دفع بيب للسيد كلاريكر مالا ليعطي هربرت وظيفة.
Magwitch was a hard-working, successful businessman. Explain. He worked hard till he became a sheep farmer and made a fortune.
كان ماجويتش مجتهدا ورجل أعمال ناجح، فسر ذلك. عمل بجد حتى أصبح مزارعا وراعيا للغنم وكون ثروة.
Pip owed too much to Magwitch, Provis. Explain. Magwitch, Provis, helped Pip become a gentleman.
كان بيب مدينا بالكثير لبروفيس أو ماجويتش، فسر ذلك. ماجويتش أو بروفيس ساعد بيب ليصبح نبيلا.
Mr. Jaggers was helpful to Magwitch. Explain. Jaggers helped Magwitch know Pip's address and become Pip's benefactor.
كان السيد جاجرز متعاونا مع ماجويتش، فسر ذلك. ساعد السيد جاجرز ماجويتش ليعرف عنوان بيب ويصبح مموله السري.
Why do you think Pip was looking forward to his 21st birthday? To receive his fortune and know his benefactor. Was it right that Pip and Herbert joined the Finches? Why? It wasn't right. This made them penniless. Pip had contradictory feelings when his sister died. Discuss. He wasn't sad, but he was angry that he didn't take revenge on Orlick. Why do you think Pip wasn't really sad when his sister died? He forgot her because she had treated him cruelly. Why do you think Biddy thought Pip wouldn't visit her? She knew he had changed. Why do you think Pip wished he had never met Miss Havisham? His life and character had changed since he met her. When students live away from families, there might be a chance for deviation. Explain. Pip and Herbert became extravagant, returned home late and woke up late. Miss Havisham hurt Estella. Do you agree? Why not? Yes. I agree. Because Miss Havisham made Estella cold, cruel, and deceitful. Why do you think Pip tried to help Herbert pay back his debts? Herbert was a faithful friend to Pip. Why do you think Magwitch called himself Provis? So that the police wouldn't recognize him. Why do you think Provis looked at Pip's watch, ring, clothes and books? To feel proud of Pip, who became a gentleman. If you were Pip, would you be happy that Provis was your secret benefactor? Why? Why not? I wouldn't be happy because Provis was a convict. Pip was grateful to Provis. Explain. Pip decided to hide Provis so that he wouldn't be arrested. Compayson was dishonest, deceitful, unfaithful. Prove this. He left Miss Havisham on their wedding day. He made Provis steal, then told the court he did nothing. Appearances are deceitful. Explain. The court believed Compayson, who behaved like a gentleman, and didn't believe Provis. Pip cared about Magwitch's life. Explain. Pip didn't want Magwitch to go out and be caught. Why do you think Provis would be caught if he went out? Provis still looked a convict even in his new clothes. Magwitch risked his life for Pip. Explain. Magwitch came back home from Australia to see Pip, his gentleman. Why do you think Pip's heart sank when he knew Provis was his benefactor? Miss Havisham was not Pip's benefactor, and Estella was not meant for him. Pip had contradictory feelings towards Provis, Magwitch. Explain. He was grateful to Provis, who did so much for him, but he disliked his behavior. Pip read characters badly. Do you agree? Why? Yes. I agree. He was ashamed of the people who loved and helped him because of their appearances. Compayson and Arthur were dishonest. Explain. They had tricked Miss Havisham and stole her money. Do you think Provis was fairly tried? Why? No. He was given a longer sentence than Compayson, who made him steal. Mr. Jaggers was secretive. Prove this. He didn't tell Pip that Magwitch, Provis, was Pip's secret benefactor. Why do you think Provis offered to make Herbert a gentleman? Herbert was Pip's friend. Provis wanted Herbert not to tell anyone about it. Do you sympathize with Magwitch, Provis? Why? Yes. Because he had an unhappy childhood and Compayson made him steal. Arthur had a good nature. Explain. He felt guilty for what he had done to his sister. Why do you think Compayson and Provis fought when Pip met them for the first time? Compayson made Provis steal, and then told the court he did nothing. How do you think Miss Havisham misled Pip? She made Pip believe she was his benefactor. What do you think made Pip think that Molly was Estella's mother? They looked like each other. In what ways do Herbert and Wemmick show their loyalty towards Pip? They helped his benefactor, Provis. Do you think that Pip was happy to have discovered who his benefactor was? Give reasons. He wasn't happy. His benefactor was a criminal. Why do you think Drummle boasted that he was having dinner with Estella? To make Pip jealous. How was Miss Havisham kind to Pip as a child? She paid for his apprenticeship. Mr. Wemmick cared for Pip's life. Discuss. He sent Pip a note warning him not to return home. In what way was Molly like Estella? Her hands, eyes, and hair reminded Pip of Estella. Do you sympathize with Molly? Why? Yes. Molly had been a homeless criminal. She was married to Provis. Mr. Jaggers was a great help to Molly, who must be thankful to him. Explain. He acquitted her for murdering her daughter and made her a housekeeper. Miss Havisham rewarded Herbert for his faithfulness. Explain. She paid for him to continue working for Clarriker. Miss Havisham proved to be kind-hearted in the end. Explain. She asked Pip to forgive her for breaking his heart. If you were Pip, would you forgive Miss Havisham when she asked you? Why? Yes, I would. Because she helped Pip when he was young. Coincidence played a role in Pip's relationship with Miss Havisham. Explain. Mr. Jaggers was the lawyer of both Miss Havisham and Provis, Pip's benefactor. Mr. Wopsle had a good memory. Explain. He remembered that Compeyson was one of the convicts on the marshes. Mr. Jaggers is very good at what he does. This is how Wemmick described Mr. Jaggers. Do you agree? Why? Why not? I agree. Mr. Jaggers helped Molly and Provis and many clients. How had Miss Havisham's actions affected other characters in the novel? She made Estella cruel. She made Pip unhappy. She made Molly miss her daughter. Who might Orlick want to take revenge on? Why? Pip, because he was a better person than Orlick. Who might Miss Havisham want to take revenge on? Why? Her brother and her fiancé, because they had deceived her. Who might Provis want to take revenge on? Why? Compeyson, because he made Provis go to prison. Pip returned the favor for Miss Havisham and risked his life for her. Explain how and why. He saved her from the fire and was injured. Pip proved to be brave. Explain. He was injured while saving Miss Havisham from the fire. Miss Havisham paid for her cruelty. Do you agree? Why/why not? Yes, I do. She was badly injured and unable to move after the fire. Herbert and Startop proved to be faithful to Pip. Prove. Herbert took Startop and some villagers to save Pip from Orlick. What would have happened if Estella hadn't been adopted by Miss Havisham? Estella wouldn't have been so cruel. Do you think Molly was right to leave Provis's house? Why? She wasn't right. She should have stayed so that she wouldn't destroy the family. Why do you think Miss Havisham was screaming, "Forgive me! Forgive me"? She probably felt the fire was a punishment for her cruelty to Pip and Estella. Why do you think Molly didn't want to restore her daughter Estella, and was she right? She probably felt that Miss Havisham would care better for her. You have always spoiled things for me. These words were said by Orlick to Pip. Do you agree that Pip spoilt Orlick's life? Why? I don't agree. Pip didn't mean to hurt Orlick. Why do you think Pip walked around the garden before leaving Miss Havisham's? He had memories with Estella there. What were Pip's expectations or ambitions at the beginning of the novel? To have a new life, to become a gentleman and to marry Estella. How did Pip's expectations become true in the end? He and Estella would never be apart again. If you were a police officer, would you believe Provis or Compeyson? Why? I would investigate carefully before believing one of them. How would you describe the relationship between Pip and Estella at the end of the novel? What do you think might happen? Pip and Estella were finally being themselves. They became friends. They might stay friends, or perhaps they will marry. In view of Pip's hopes and expectations at the beginning of the novel, Pip seems to end the novel as a failure. Discuss. I don't agree. Pip managed to become better educated and attract Estella. How did fate reward Pip for his kindness? He and Estella planned never to be apart again. Provis had a very bad end. Do you agree? Why? He was given a life sentence. He died without meeting his daughter, Estella. Do you think the end was not completely good for Estella? Why? Yes. She didn't meet her real father, Provis. Miss Havisham kept her promises. Prove this. She had promised Pip that she would help Herbert. Before she died, she left Herbert some of her money. Orlick deserved his own end. Explain. He was arrested while trying to rob Uncle Pumblechook's house. He deserved punishment because he was evil. Joe proved to be faithful to Pip in the end. Explain. He paid Pip's debts. Pip and Herbert proved to be hard-working. Explain. After some years, they became managers in Mr. Clarker's business in Egypt. Do you think Estella was punished for her cruelty? Why? Yes. Drummle was cruel to her. She was no longer beautiful. She was older, looked tired, and her eyes were sad. Why do you think Estella sold Miss Havisham's land? She probably wanted to forget her days with that woman. How can you show that Estella became weak in the end? She begged Pip to stay friend to her. Pip proved to be faithful and caring for Estella. Illustrate. He decided not to be apart from her. Compeyson paid for his crimes. Discuss. He was arrested in the end. He disappeared underwater after his fight with Provis. Do you think Provis could take revenge on Compeyson? Why? Yes. Because they had a fight in which Compeyson disappeared underwater. Why do you think Provis looked at Pip affectionately before he died? He might have wanted to ask Pip to care for his daughter. Do you think Estella did the right thing to leave Drummle? Why? Yes. He was cruel to her. Pip proved to love Provis very much. Illustrate. He was badly affected by Provis's death. He had strange dreams and heard voices. What are the most important moral lessons in Great Expectations? For each lesson, what is an example from the book? The most important moral lessons from the book are: being a good person is more important than wealth. Good deeds will come back to benefit you. Bad deeds will come back to haunt you. Family is the most important wealth, and true love is classless. What is the significance of Jaggers and Wemmick in Great Expectations? The significance is that Jaggers is the criminal lawyer hired by Magwitch to help Pip with his great expectations. He represents the two sides of law, the good and the bad. Jaggers helps Miss Havisham adopt Estella because he often saw children tried at a criminal bar, one pretty little child out of the heap who could be saved. 2. John Wemmick is Mr. Jaggers' clerk and Pip's friend. He represents a person who has learned how to survive in both the public and private. What are the main themes in Great Expectations by Charles Dickens? Please include explanations of these themes. The main themes in Great Expectations by Charles Dickens include social class, poverty, class differences, crime and injustice, and dreams, aspirations and crime. The central theme of Great Expectations may well be the search for one's identity. In Great Expectations, why did Wemmick leave a note for Pip which reads, "Don't go home"? Pip stays the night at an inn after receiving a message from Wemmick telling him not to return home. The next day, he meets with Wemmick, who informs him that Compeyson is watching him, so he wants to warn him. Compare and contrast Pip and Estella in Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. The thing that Pip and Estella most have in common is their background. Both have humble origins. Pip is an orphan raised by his sister and her blacksmith husband, whereas both of Estella's parents were convicts. The difference, however, is that Estella remains unaware of her true origins. Why did Estella marry Drummle? Estella marries Drummle in Great Expectations to hurt the good men who loved her. How does Dickens see public education in Great Expectations? Dickens sees the way in which public schools teach children bad and the teacher falls asleep during school hours. What is the relationship between Estella and Miss Havisham in Great Expectations? The relationship between Estella and Miss Havisham in Great Expectations is one of teacher and pupil. Miss Havisham adopted Estella. In bringing up Estella, Miss Havisham is teaching her how to take revenge on men. Why did Pip lie to Mrs. Joe and Pumblechook about Miss Havisham in Great Expectations? Pip lies to Mrs. Joe and Uncle Pumblechook because he does not want to tell them what happens at Miss Havisham's house. He does not think they will understand. How and why does Miss Havisham die in Great Expectations? Miss Havisham dies because she goes too close to her fireplace in her distraught condition after asking Pip to forgive her. The material of her old wedding dress, which she has worn for decades, is so rotted that it immediately goes up into flames. Describe Pip's first meeting with the convict and his consequent suffering until he runs away with the food for the convict on the marshes. When Pip first meets Magwitch in the marshes as a young boy, he is terrified at the sight of a man with a leg iron. The convict threatens Pip and demands that he bring him a file and food. Why did Pip not enjoy the Christmas dinner in Great Expectations by Charles Dickens? Because his sister wasn't kind to him. What are reasons why Magwitch wanted Pip to be a gentleman? Magwitch wanted to make up for his criminal life in one way or another. He also loved Pip and grateful for Pip's help when they met. According to Magwitch, why did Compayson get a lesser sentence than Magwitch when they both got into trouble in Great Expectations? This is the typical problem with our court systems. Magwitch's basic claim here is that the judges are prejudiced or that they apply sentences unjustly. What is the purpose of Great Expectations? The purpose of Great Expectations is to demonstrate how expectations can set a person on the wrong course and cause them to ignore what really matters. Pip's expectations lead him down the wrong path and keep him from discriminating which people truly care about him, and he eventually learns not to rely on his expectations of others. Great Expectations tells a story of characters who have ambitious and often unrealistic expectations for both themselves and the people in their lives. It could be argued that the purpose of this novel is to show how people's expectations in life are often unrealistic, uninformed, or unreasonable. General questions. What is the moral lesson of the story? What have you learned from Great Expectations? Good people will be rewarded and bad people will be punished. Good will defeat evil in the end. How did good defeat evil in the novel? Good people were rewarded and bad people were punished. Pip and Estella would never be apart again. Which character in the novel do you like most? Why? Joe. He loved Pip and helped him and asked nothing in return. Which character in the story do you hate most? Why? Orlick, because he hated Pip for no reason. What does Estella symbolize in Great Expectations? Dissatisfaction. Guilt is one of the main themes in the novel. Discuss. Miss Havisham felt guilty for making Estella cruel and breaking Pip's heart. The other side is not always greener. How is this applied to the novel? It means one should be satisfied with his own life. What is the theme of Great Expectations? Affection, loyalty, and conscience are more important than wealth and class. What is the irony in Great Expectations? Miss Havisham, who was cruel, wanted Pip to be a good man. What does Miss Havisham represent in Great Expectations? Revenge and disappointment. What is the main conflict in Great Expectations? Pip's ambitious desire to reinvent himself and rise to a higher social class. Who is the antagonist, villain, wicked character in the novel? Why? Compayson, who harmed Miss Havisham and Magwitch. What does money symbolize in Great Expectations? Dignity has nothing to do with wealth. What does Miss Havisham's dress symbolize? The lost past. Why is Great Expectations a tragedy? It exposes the dark side of life. Why do you think Havisham had a mental illness? She had depression and social anxiety. What kind of character is Pip? Pip is kind, curious, ambitious, and optimistic. What are Joe's values in Great Expectations? He was hardworking, honorable, loyal, and fair. Why is Great Expectations so important? Why is Great Expectations still relevant today? Many of the ideas in it can appeal to modern audiences. Why is Great Expectations called that? Pip expects a great future. What does Joe Gargery symbolize? He symbolizes a life Pip rejects, but he has values. Mrs. Joe wasn't very loving towards Pip. Explain. She complained about Pip and hit him. Joe was a kind, understanding man. Prove this. He didn't object to the convicts eating his food. Miss Havisham is a strange, unhappy woman. Explain. She never left her house. She was still sad as her fiancés left her. Pip has a powerful conscience. Prove this. He felt guilty for taking the food and the file. Estella is cold and cruel. Explain. She was very rude to Pip though she knew he loved her. Joe was loyal to his wife. Explain. She treated him and Pip badly, but he never criticized her. Joe and Biddy were forgiving. Explain. In the end they forgave Pip. Herbert was a true friend. Prove this. He looked after Pip when he came to London. Herbert was friendly. Prove this. He tried to make Joe comfortable in London. Pip was not realistic. Illustrate. He had romantic ideas about his future which were not realistic. He believed that just by being better educated Estella would accept him.